welcome home to you, new entrepreneur who is building the plane as you fly it. We are cheering you on. We are absolutely cheering you on. A little bit about me and my husband. We are worship pastors at our local church. We love the Lord. And so we're a faith-based Christian company that's helping entrepreneurs affordably get started in business ownership through coffee carts. And so our story is that we are in full-time ministry, and we always have dreamed that full-time ministry would never be like a career or a means of income for us, because it's really not sustainable and like a long-term plan, but that ministry would always be who we are and what we do as followers of Jesus. But as far as our livelihood, my husband has loved coffee forever. He's managed many coffee shops, and it wasn't until 2019 when we had our son, his name is Bear, when we had our son, that we had this moment. And my husband had been managing a coffee shop. He didn't get paternity leave. I just remember being a little frustrated by that. Like I just started having this like wish of like, I wish that we could control our time a little bit differently. Like our schedule is, we have this precious thing, this precious boy, and it just feels like we're losing our time with him because we don't have a choice. That was kind of the very beginning of feeling like maybe one day we would be business owners. And then COVID happened. Everyone's job was threatened. And for whatever reason, my husband, he's a manager, he's a barista, but his job was considered essential during COVID. Like there were people that couldn't work at all, like construction workers or whatever. Like there were some people that couldn't work at all. They weren't essential. And yet somehow in America, coffee stayed essential. And if that doesn't tell you that the coffee industry is booming, I don't know what does. But anyway, his job was considered essential, so he did get to keep his job. I also kept my job, but I just remember the feeling of there being like, we don't know what tomorrow looks like. We might not have jobs in the future. And that was the start too of like, okay, God, what can we do to start building something? And when I think about the fact that God is a creator and he created us in his image, he is honored and he is glorified when we are also creating things, especially, or maybe most importantly, for him to breathe on. And so we started dreaming. And I specifically remember at this time at the church, I was helping serve our missionaries. If you don't know what a missionary is, what they are is people who have committed to following Jesus and teaching other people who have never heard about Jesus, teaching them about the gospel and giving out Bibles and planting churches and serving people in unreached areas. And many of them end up going to these countries that they're traveling to on like business visas. So for example, some of them would go and open up like a CrossFit gym, or they would go and open up a cafe or things like that. And that would be the way that they meet people and start building community so that they could share the gospel kind of like secretly, because many of these places they're not allowed to share and proclaim Jesus. And so they would open up these businesses and they'd secretly be like underground churches. And I remember telling my husband, like, with COVID, people weren't meeting in buildings anymore and nothing was certain. I just said, what if we started a coffee company because we could be the underground church option? Like, what if we were missionaries to America and like started a coffee company that would allow us to interact with people and still be able to be bold in our faith and to be full of joy and to make lifelong friends and to, really experience what we see in Acts 2, which is community with people. And we were sitting down together and we just said, let's just do it. The cost of a coffee cart starts at around $35,000. It's about the price of a car payment. Like we will figure it out. My husband was making, barista money. And so we kind of were like, this is the time in our lives to take a lateral move. And it's better now to take a move where it's easier to leave his job and try to make up that income than if he was to climb the ladder somewhere, then we'd eventually in the future have to take a pay cut. And so we were thinking through all of this stuff, and then we decided, let's just take the leap. I didn't know how to get $35,000. I knew that we had costed everything out. We had just begun the plan of having a coffee cart. I Googled, how do you get $35,000? And then I applied for a personal loan. It was at 25% interest, which is absolutely ridiculous. And then I clicked submit. I didn't even know that it was like actually me applying for a personal loan. Like I just thought I was applying for like more information or inquiring about more information. And then the next morning we woke up with $35,000 in our bank account. And I was like, oh my gosh, we have a monthly payment. Oh my gosh, we have the cash to buy this coffee cart. We need to do it. And so kind of naively, we launched our coffee cart business and we LLC'd in May. And within 12 weeks, we had opened up a coffee cart and we had parked it somewhere during the day to try to get, some kind of regular traffic, and then we would move that coffee cart to do events. And we just thought, if we can get like weddings or baby showers, like we could bring, we'll bring the coffee shop to you. And we started dreaming that way. And then very quickly, thank God, because of our community and just the connections that we've made, we started being booked more than our one cart could handle. And so in a matter of months, we went from having one coffee cart to having 3 coffee carts. And now we were serving all the time. Then we wanted to dream about building, a bigger cafe, like a brick and mortar that would be the hub of Quigley Coffee. And it was absolutely a different type of faith leap. We didn't have the funds to do it. Again, it was one of those things where it was like, okay, God, if it's your will, it's your bill. And we decided to take the leap and signed a lease before we knew how we were going to pay for it, applied for an SBA loan, and were able to slowly get that cafe open. It took about 14 months, and it's been so fun to have our friends and have a place that's, ours, that we've been able to steward. And now we have a cafe that's operating on its own as a functioning restaurant. And then we have all of our coffee carts that are still very much actively doing what they do, which is doing catering events and different things like that. Over a year ago, we had this realization that we need to decide how we want to grow. And one thing about me is I'm an avid researcher. And so I absolutely feel like one of my specialties is like throw your nets in every direction and just see where the fish are, like just see what fish catch, which can be exhausting. But I just felt like, let's see what all of our options are. Like what does growth for Quigley Coffee look like? Or even what does an exit plan for Quigley Coffee look like? Like what would we feel satisfied with if we built something and then decided, to do something else in the future? And so we did. We got business valuations. We started seeing like, okay, if we sold tomorrow, what could we get if we sold? Okay, that's one option that we could do. The second option is that we decide to go more cafes. We want more locations like all over Florida, or do we want to open one up in another state in like an A-list location? And how do we get funding for that? And so we start looking into more cafes and figuring out the financials for what would be necessary to do that. And then we started thinking about our catering carts, and we're like, how could we grow our catering carts? Because when you look at profit margins, restaurant margins are normally anywhere between 3 and 5%, which is very minimal. And it's a lot of work for that 3 to 5% versus our catering carts, because there's no overhead and there's no regular payroll. You contract out baristas and things like that. Our catering margins are closer between 60 and 80%, depending on how we're paying people. Like if we're doing it ourselves or if we're paying baristas. And those margins are so much better. And so financially, we're looking at, all of our options as a business. And then we basically land and say, if we're going to grow this thing, we need to grow what we know works. And what we know works are the coffee carts. That's how we started. And it's been the most consistent over the last 6 years. And so I feel a little bit like we've tried everything. We've tried the brick and mortar, we've tried pop-up events, we've tried hospitality, we've tried cafes, we've tried traveling America with coffee carts and clients. We've done all of it. And now we have a healthy, barometer to say, okay, of all the things that we've tried, this one makes the most sense. And so we decided to become franchisors. And instead of doing Quigley Coffee Company and focusing on just our cafes, we became Quigley Coffee Company, and we're franchising coffee carts.